Hola. So Greg here, and today we're going to have a look at what really for me is the critical hot topic of our times. It's the subject that is at the center of everything in this emerging paradigm. It's the one thing that we need to understand, that we need to step into, and we need to master and embrace if we're going to step forward into our own self-mastery, into the new earth that's emerging around us. And that aspect is self-love. Whenever I say to people that that's literally all we need to do, that's all we need to master, everyone says, yeah, well, what about truth? Well, truth exists within love. One who properly understands the alchemy of love and self-love is automatically magnetized towards the truth. Okay, so what about the fact that we need to transcend some of our wounds and our traumas before we can step forward into our full, authentic, sovereign embodiment? Again, if we master the alchemy of love, it burns away all of those things. It is love that allows the space for the pain to be experienced. It's love that opens the doorway, love of self, that opens the doorway and gives us the confidence to let down the walls to allow these processes to happen. And say, okay, so what about all these other entities and outside interference that we encounter on the path? Again, if we master the alchemy of love, of self-love, then none of this has any power. We burn away. We don't need to remove the entities in our sphere. We just need to, and away they go. This is the power that we have when we step into true self-love. So, but we need to perhaps define what self-love really is, because even until recently, even I was quite confused about this, or I had a faulty definition of what self-love was. Having spent most of my life having, a certainly reasonably well-developed love of self, I thought that I had a handle on this. The fact that for many years I've been able to look at myself in the mirror and really say, I love you, man. This, and feel it as well. And I have felt and experienced that. And for me, that was what self-love was, the ability to accept myself and to love myself completely in that way. And that's true. That is exactly what self-love is, the ability to accept myself wholly and completely just the way I am. And the love that emerges within that space. But the problem is, we're not always aware of all of the aspects of ourselves that need loving. We've created these psychological selves largely as protection mechanisms in our lives to protect ourselves from continuing to experience pain as children. And as we've gone through this process, we've built up these walls. We've created these psychological selves. And there are so many detailed aspects to this psychological self that began really as a set of belief structures and faulty ideas around what love is, that allow us to hide from the pain of not love that we might have experienced as children or as a DNA genetic legacy in this way. And so what happens in this is that there are a lot of aspects of ourselves that we've just not come to accept. Aspects of our psychological self, of our facade, the facade that we put out to the world, that we've just not been willing to accept. Because by accepting these things, it often means that if we are still controlled in any real way by our psychological selves, it means a diminishment of that psychological self, of our individuality, of the identity that we've created around ourselves. And so this really deconstructing our psychological self is a massive part of getting to a space of real self-love. But let me explain to you my experience of real self-love, because this is, for me, the most beautiful thing that has emerged in my life, beyond the realization of truth, beyond any other experiences I've had on this remarkable journey of awakening and sovereignty. The most wonderful thing that's actually happened to me was relatively recently, in the last few months, when I'd been allowing myself to process certain aspects of trauma that I'd allowed to lay dormant and not address. And as I was going through this process and really engaging this self-inquiry, this truthful self-inquiry, because this commitment to truth is what we need to go through this process. And as we have that commitment to truth, we don't avoid anything. As soon as something becomes, as soon as an experiential catalyst in our environment mirrors something to us, and we're truthful with ourselves, we see what aspects of our psychological self it is that we've been denying, so that we can accept them, so that we can process them, and so that we can get through to the heart of the pain, the trauma, whatever it is that's been driving the continuance of that psychological self in the first place. And so as I'd cleared this psychological self, its acceptance, that acceptance of it, and deconstructed aspects, I began to see inside, or it was a momentary thing. I found a little boy. And I'd heard all kinds of stories and heard everyone's different take on what this so-called inner child work is. And all these different programs that people have for getting in touch with your inner child. But most of them, not all, certainly wouldn't like to throw everyone into this category, but most are never really getting to the kind of experience that I'm getting to today. It's very intellectual. There's a visualization component where you're imagining, you're creating visually this connection with this inner child that's there. And when we do this, they can only ever go so far. We can't take that, we don't truly experience the connection with this, what is effectively another being that is us. It is us. It contains every aspect of our essence. And we don't necessarily get in touch with that when we're forcing a connection to our inner child. If we deconstruct our psychological selves, this connection opens up naturally, and we find within a natural connection to a little boy or a little girl. I'm not even going to call it an inner child because it carries so much baggage. Connection to a little boy or a little girl who has been sat inside us for the last 10, 20, 30, 50, 80 years with us, hidden away. And that hiding, ever since we created these psychological selves, that little boy, that little girl created psychological self to protect itself from pain. This fractured self of me and that little boy, or me and that little girl, is not a complete. It's not a complete being. They're not even properly aware of each other's existence. And so, what's happening as we express, as that little boy or that little girl develops ego traits as expressions of its illusory self, of its psychological self, we develop, to certain extents or another, aspects of self-loathing. I mean, we might be very self-loving people, naturally, but still there are these qualities about us. We might do something and then go, oh, how did I do that? How can I be so stupid? How can I have done that? How can I have done this? How can I have done the other? What we don't realize until we actually reconnect with this little boy or little girl inside, that what we've been doing our entire lives is chastising this little boy, this little girl inside, chastising them, berating them, effectively beating them into submission, day in, day out, repeating or continuing that repeated behavior that caused that little boy or little girl to create its psychological self, its facade in the first place. And so as we do this, as we berate ourselves, not realizing that we're actually berating and really destroying this innocent creature that lies at our heart. As we're doing this, we are cementing her position, its belief structure, its way of life. And until we get through and we connect with that little boy or little girl, no amount of inner child work will have us stop doing that. We might reduce it. We might work very hard and diligently to stop berating ourselves. There will still be this aspect of ourselves that relates to some form of self-loathing until we actually find and integrate and connect with each aspect of ourselves. And what happened for me when I was able to do this is when I first saw this little boy, my son, really? I'd heard about you. I knew you were there. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for all I've done to you. I'm so sorry for all you've experienced. It's okay now. It's okay. I'm here. Now I know you're there. Now I know that all you've ever needed is my love, not anyone else's. You've not really been seeking and needing that love from outside of yourself. You only ever needed it from me. And I'm here to give it to you. I love you, truly. And through this space that we may spend days in, hours and days in, I certainly did spend a very long time in this space, catching up with myself, making that aspect of myself that I had not only been ignoring, but continuing to berate day in, day out, reconnecting with this essence, loving him until he could calm down enough to say, okay, I trust you. I believe you now. Believe you. And in this trust, this sense of trust that's built around true love of self, creates the space for us to actually feel and transmute all of our original wounds and trauma. Because the little boy's saying, okay, I'm still afraid. I still don't want to feel that, but I love you, and I know you love me, and I trust you. And if you say we have to do this, then we'll do it together. And that you enter this space that is essentially guaranteed to finish off your cleaning and transformation process in days, in weeks, if we continue to engage it with that with full truth and full commitment. You know, I find now when I walk past a mirror and I look into that mirror, I'm not just saying, I love you. I am saying, wow, I love you. And there's this love affair that has birthed with self. And when we master, when we get this, and we actually have fallen in love with ourselves, it also now means that we can relate to everyone and everything in our environments cleanly. It means we can have the kind of relationships with others that we've always dreamed of. And life is relationship. There is nothing that exists in your life that makes your life, you exist as a being here on earth that does not involve you existing in relationship to other things, whether it's people or the environment. Primary relationships, our children, our colleagues, these are all, everything we do, everything we are is relationship. And so again, when we master this real alchemy of divine love, which is love of self, all of the doors open for every other aspect of our life to fall into complete alignment with truth, with who we really are at our core and our source. So, I can say, without any reservation, I love you. Have a wonderful day.